fiction writer, which was unusual in England at that time. I wasn't reading Shakespeare all the time. And I said, you know, I've never connected to any of the science fiction films. They're all over-designed. And I've no idea why every character had a Nero collar and Indian jacket, which they somehow thought, oh, that's what is the future. And he said, no, I'm trying to do a spaghetti western in space, which intrigued me immediately. And I said, well, look, my idea of a spaceship would be like an old car that somebody's repaired and it's got dented and it's dripping oil. I only realized when I got to London in August that I'd actually described the Millennium Falcon to a T. It's even in the script, you know, this is a pile of junk. So that's how I ended up in England with a budget that when we read the script and looked at what had to be built, it was impossible. But I've always been a bit of a rebel, and this was a dream script to me, so I said, you know what, we're going to find a way to do this, and John Barry, the designer, did the same. So we kind of got stuck in, and Fox would not guarantee the money. George had some money left from American Graffiti. He hired a tiny studio, and George and myself and John Barry, one art director and the producer, were 4 months in this little tiny studio, and we got to know each other as friends, trying to work out how to make this film. And reading the script, you may know, it's more common now, but George took R2-D2 and C-3PO from a Kurosawa movie called Forbidden Fortress. And the lead characters, who are the storytellers in that, are two peasants, one's tall, one's short. They get caught up in a war that's nothing to do with them, and they got taken prisoner. They get released in a desert, and they have a row and separate, and then they come together because a princess is trying to defend her kingdom against a big bad baron who are coming in to do the takeover. That's the story of Star Wars. And so we knew we could make C-3PO because there's a very famous German film called Metropolis, made in 1927, and it featured a gold robot who could take 3 steps. That was all it could do. We knew in 75 we could do it much better than that. We thought we could do that, but R2-D2, there's no CGI. You've got to go back with your clocks now. There was no animation in films. There was only kind of a very primitive radio control. It didn't really work, despite our special effects guy saying that it was going to be amazing. It didn't work. So we knew if we couldn't make R2-D2 work, there wasn't any film. It wasn't going to start. And that's how we started. And we asked Robert Watts, who was then in charge of it, said, I haven't got any money, they're not giving me any. My carpenter I hired, who made all the props for Monty Python, and they had no money. If you watch Holy Grail, they couldn't even afford horses, they had coconut shells. So I got Bill, and I said, Bill, we got to do this. So he came on board. He had some wood in his garage he brought in, and because of the Daleks had people in them. And we thought, well, if we put somebody in it, we could probably make it move around. So we hired Kenny Baker, and we had a Ralph McQuarrie drawing, that's all we had to go on, where we measured out R2-D2 could only be 4 feet high, and Ken is 3'8", and he had a comedy troupe. He was a real storyteller, comedian, so we knew he would kind of be okay sitting inside this egg, especially in Tunisia in the heat. And so we built a wooden one with Bill's wood from home around him. And then Bill said, I can't make the top, this is domed. I went to a junk pile next door to the studio. I found a laptop, so you can hear me. I'm going like this. I don't think I install our channel. No. Hello? Hello? I've got light. Hello? Oh,
Whoa!
I might end up shouting. Anyway, I found a laptop which we bought for 10 shillings, which is not much money. That fitted, so we made a top.
Like one of the big, like the movie lights that you see
Yeah,
on
it
set,
was-
like they just basically took one of those.
Yeah, it was from the 40s.
40s.
Yeah, it was a film light. It just fitted. So he has a little arms on the front. Bill said, I can't make those. He sent me home that night with a penknife and a bit of wood, and I had to carve it. And we stuck Kenny Baker in it, and he could not move it. So I had the idea, why don't we get his boots? He says, well, I'm just going to shout. So we got Kenny's boots, stuck them in the bottom of the legs because his legs went through. That's the design of how we made it so the legs could move. And he still couldn't do it. And I thought, it was just a wooden, and in the book there's a picture of it, you can see at the table. I thought to make it look a little bit more like a robot, I went to an old trading post place and I got a handful of old bits of army stuff. There were 2 lights from a Dakota aeroplane. I stuck those in. They're still there on R2-D2. That's exactly the same. They haven't changed. And I got some grids. We put those in, and I picked up for some reason a fighter pilot's harness. And Bill said, "I've got an idea." We stapled that inside the wooden shell, and Kenny wore R2-D2 like a rucksack. And George came down, and Gary Kurtz, and he took 3 steps. He actually did it before he fell over. But that actually was one of the most auspicious moments, because then the movie could actually go ahead. We could make it work in the 2-legged mode. We knew the 3-legged mode would have to be something else. So that's
It
how
all
we
hinged
started.
on that little droid. The
Yeah.
whole dang thing.
And it was only when we finally moved to the studio, they finally gave the money, Fox, and said we'll do it in December, right before Christmas. And we only moved in the studio in January, and we were filming in March.
Right.
So for any science fiction film, it's normally a year's prep. We had 2 months to make this whole movie. It was insane.
And part of the key to that happening was a particular deal you made where you found truckloads of old airplane parts. Do you want to tell a little bit about how you came across that? That pretty much saved the whole thing, didn't it?
It was the only way to do it, because my budget was so low. It came out of 2 things. One is when I looked at the script and I thought, these weapons, I can't make all these weapons. So I always had the idea, and I loved the Sterling submachine gun. To me, it's a science fiction weapon. So I went on my own. I didn't tell George, nobody. I got some T-strips, stuck it around the barrel. I found some old sights from an army unit that were the gun sights you look through. I stuck those on the top, and then I thought, he keeps saying that Han Solo is a gambler and a cowboy. So I thought, I found a Mauser which had a wooden stock, and I thought, this is perfect. And I did the same. I stuck another gun sight on the top, called George over. I said, you better have a look at these. And this was my moment where I'd be fired or I was on the right track. And George loved them. And the big advantage, you could actually fire them. Science fiction weapons before went beat, they were all plastic. They never worked. These were heavy. You got a flame out, a bit of smoke. And George stayed with me, actually. We made Princess Leia's gun together with super glue.
Oh, really? Yeah. Oh, wait, that's right. Yeah, you had a moment.
Starting pistol.
Yeah.
So I kind of got this idea then of using junk. And driving around London, I thought, I cannot make these sets. It's not, I don't have the money nor the time. And I kind of, crossing my fingers, went up to George and my designer, John Barry, and said, I've got an idea. If I got aeroplane junk, which nobody wanted, I could stick it into the sets and we could make Star Wars like that. I think because George was an independent filmmaker who made THX 1138, he said do it. And that was the first thing when we got to EMI. I did. I flew in a little airplane and we went to 4 airfields and there were bigger than this room, junk piles. There were Rolls-Royce jet engines in the rain. Nobody wanted it. I bought truckloads for, I think, £50.
That's crazy.
And kind of crossed my fingers it would work. And there's a story I tell that kind of sums up so everybody knows, and it's not out of malice or anything, but there was no support for this film. The studios didn't want it. The crew just didn't understand it. None of them. They didn't understand this young American director who never said anything, who'd written this children's story. And I made, by then, I found Chewbacca's bowcaster with the balls on the end, which Ralph McQuarrie actually had a blaster, but I found that and thought this is much better to suit.
It's amazing to me that they came that way. Like
Yeah.
I would have guessed
Yeah,
that
that's
like
how I found
Chewie's
it.
bowcaster, wouldn't you kind of think they added the balls to make it like unique? No, it came that way.
And it came that way. I
Nice.
found it like that. I found the gaffy stick, because I was trying to figure out what would be correct for each of the characters. And the Tusken Raiders were desert people. They wouldn't have the sophisticated weapons that the Death Star and Stormtroopers, all of this had. So I found a gaffy stick. I changed everything, like 10 or 20%, so we would have a little kind of Star Wars look.
Right.
And so I found an old mace they'd made, and I drew out the end of the gaffy stick, stuck back in. The end, that was the gaffy stick. We only ever had one of those. And then,
Really?
yeah.
I guess in
I
the
couldn't
first
do
film,
two.
yeah, there's
I
only a
couldn't make
couple
two. I
shots.
couldn't make
right?
another one.
Yeah.
It's like that with everything. And when we got into EMI, of course, all the big crew comes in. They laid out a table like this, put all my weapons out. In they come, the first ADs and the prop people and all of these people. And he picked up my Sterling submachine gun, literally threw it at me and said, "This is crap." And they went off to get me fired. And I thought, okay, it's going to be like that from now on, but I'm now friends with George and we're making the film that I want to do and he wants to do, and John Barry the same, so we just got stuck in. It didn't change from that, making this whole film. And the property master, there was a very giant of a man who was one real support, and he was a legend. He did Stanley Kubrick's films, he did all of the other, any big movie, you had like an army of people and everything, Frank would do it. So I was young, so he called me boy. He said, "What do you want, boy?" And I said, "Just clear out this room. I got a load of junk coming. There's no furniture. There's no curtains to hang. Nothing. This is going to be different." And he said, "Okay." I was standing there when the first truck arrived, and it was literally piled. There were jet engines all roped on. There was parts of airplanes junk. I'm standing there watching it go in. He's next to me, Frank Bruckner. I just hear him say, "You know, you're mad, boy." And I thought, yeah, well, I hope this works. And,
It's insane that so many of the little things that were just like a quick creative idea of yours became so iconic. Like to just take the Mauser and to put that scope on top of Han's like blaster, just like one change, and all of a sudden you've got this iconic thing that everybody was just drawn to. It's
I think because it's real, you know, I never believed any science fiction film, and so nor did the audience. I'm just an audience, and I was determined to make, if we do our job correctly, you don't notice the sets and the props. They're part of the story. So my mission was to do that with everything that was real.
yeah.
And George always said to me quietly, "I'm actually not making a science fiction film, I'm making a documentary." And that was the same mindset. And I think
and in the end, not having any money, it's like all I would do, we had a buyer and I said, get me anything that's broken. He would bring in truckloads of old cameras that were broken. He'd bring in calculators. There was a telephone exchange in England. They were closing down to modernise it. We bought virtually the whole telephone exchange, and this was like £50. No one wanted this stuff. I had a room. There was nothing ever that I thought, oh, I'll take that and make this out of it. I just got all this junk that I could go in and say, okay, and the first thing I had to make was Luke's binoculars.
Yeah.
And I found a part of a UMIG camera, and then there was a still camera that had a flip-up end, and I used so much super glue. That's all I had. And I stuck 3 of them together, and I thought, you know what, I could, for the audience to understand it's binoculars, I'll put 2 camera lenses on the front. So I went to this hire shop in London, where we got all our camera gear, and bought 2 very cheap lenses and stuck them on with super glue. Everything was made like that, and it was always like huge panic because we were shooting in Tunisia in March. Everything had to go by truck and through 5 countries, so there was tremendous pressure to get everything onto these trucks to get it there. And I was also sent to Tunisia with the art director. The art director was there making sure the sets were ready, and I was there dressing and making sure everything was ready for shooting.
Right.
So we were there right up front. So the pressure was tremendous on us to get everything ready.
Yeah. You sure did. It's
Well-
crazy that aesthetic you created just like spawned so much, that you and George like coming together and having this literal vision of what it was going to look like. Because I was watching, everybody see the new Skeleton Crew trailer that just came out? It's awesome fun. The Skeleton Crew show that's coming.
Yeah.
And it's very like 80s inspired.
It is.
But I was watching it, and the aesthetic is very much in parts going for that original look that you guys laid down. So even to this day, through all the things that have been created, comes down from that first conversation of you and George being like, I want a lived-in universe. I want Junkie. I want, it's
true, yeah. And God bless Dave Filoni, because he brought it all back with The Mandalorian, and he brought back what the fans wanted. They wanted that look. It's part of Star Wars,
As much as I did also love the prequels. You know me, I'm a prequel apologist.
Yeah, no, I love them too.
I loved it. Like it made it. The fact that you guys established that look of the original trilogy, and then of course going back in time, this grandiose, clean look of the prequels made it feel so mythical to me. It was like we're watching like a fairy tale come to life.
True, yeah.
I used to love that. Sorry, I want to fit in everything, so we'll keep moving along. But we're gonna do the big one now, because this script had all this stuff that you're hearing that Roger had to make. Things you were very proud of those binoculars, how those came out and pulled off and everything. So he didn't have a lot of time to get to a particular item that needed to be created. And they were like, "Come on, Roger, we need this lightsaber." So he was like, "Okay,
laser sword."
Sorry, at the time, yes,
it was
laser sword. We need a laser sword." So you were like, "Okay, I'll make the laser sword." You went to a friend's shop. And that's where the story of the lightsaber kind of began.
There's a certain thing with the junk of finding something that was appropriate for a character or a prop or anything like that, and this was going on with the sets that we had to build and doing all of that. And the one thing that eluded me was this laser sword, and we only had, George never said ever what he wanted. There was a script was there, I had to bring it to him. And but there was 6 Ralph McQuarrie paintings, which really, he's the genius of Star Wars. He just sat with George while he was writing the script and painted scenes. George one day just idly said to him, "Why don't you get me a creature who's about 6'5", who looks like my dog Indy?" And he drew Chewbacca. That's where he came from. And the one thing that wasn't there was the lightsaber, a laser sword. There was a kind of lance thing that actually Darth Vader had at that time.
Yeah.
None of the
There's,
others
there's
had.
one where Luke had like one, but you
Yeah.
can barely, you can tell there's
You
just
can
something
see.
in his hand,
Yeah.
but he does have the blade
Yeah.
coming up. But yeah, you're right. There was no like distinct look to the handle. Yeah.
It was when I went to get the lenses for the binoculars, because he rented out Graflex cameras, and that was the press camera in the 40s that everyone used, the paparazzi at that time. They always worked. And I was buying these lenses, and I said, David, do you have any, I've got to make this weapon. Do you have anything here that I could look at? And he said, oh, we got torches, which I refused, because the special effects that made one, and George rejected it. It looked nothing like whatever. And he said, oh, there's a box of stuff under the shelf there. Just go and have a rummage around. I've not looked, they're all dusty. And literally the first box I pulled out, it was tissue paper. There were three, well, the Graflex handle, which is the origin of this, that clipped onto a Graflex camera, and it had the silver reflector, and you put a flash bulb in it. And I saw these three things, and I thought, oh, that's a lightsaber. It was like the Holy Grail moment. I just loved it, and I thought, well, I could use it like that. But I got the three of them, and raced back to the studios. I got the buyer to give me this T-strip to put around the barrel of the Sterling submachine gun to change it, and I had a bit left over, so I just was super glue. I quickly stuck it around, and I'd broken down a Texas Instrument calculator that morning, because if I got anything, I knew I couldn't use it, but I had a screwdriver. I'd look inside and find things, and I found this bubble strip that fitted, and I thought that changes the only thing I didn't like. And I called George over and said, I think I might have found the lightsaber. And he took it, it's heavy, it's weighty, and he smiled, and that's it. This is about $15 probably it cost, the first one. After that, the only thing he wanted was, because it wasn't used in Tunisia, but it was hanging on Luke's belt, so we added a D-ring just so it could hang on. And then, because of no time, we would all meet in my office in the morning, the art department and the construction manager. I had to have a kettle and a box of tea bags and a little kind of fridge with some milk in it. And most important was, I don't know if any of you know here, but McVitie's chocolate biscuits, they're digestives with chocolate on one side. The British Film Institute runs on those things. And I would get packets, they'd all sit there with the tea, dunking it in the tea, eating in the morning. And that one morning they were saying, well, we can't do a blade, what are we going to do? And I'd done some art installations and painting from projection material. It kind of glowed a bit, so I suggested this, and then they said, oh yeah, go and do it. There was a big meeting, it's written up about that. I was down at the meeting with special effects, the director of photography, who was a miserable human being who hated the whole film. I don't know why he was doing it. He just said, oh, that won't work, and I don't want you spoiling my set lighting. And George overrode him and said, do it. So the special effects drilled this out. They put a little tiny motor in it with a wooden dowel that was about that long, pretty flimsy. What he did do was set the motor a tiny bit off center so it vibrated, and we got a glow out of it. And you can see on some of the rehearsals with Alec Guinness and Dave Prowse, when they're rehearsing the only lightsaber fight in that first one, you can see it. And we'd also made a judgment that the blades should never cross through each other. It should be like Kurosawa sword fights, or that they would clash but they would never bite through each other, otherwise it kind of didn't make any sense.
Right.
So Alec Guinness and Dave Prowse had something to hit against. They kept breaking them, right? They were so fragile, but that literally was how we did it. And then there was a thing called rotoscoping at the time, where you painted every frame by hand, and George had them do that. These were the founding members of ILM, and they painted a little bit more of a glow on it. That's how we did it. Yeah.
And you also, it says Graflex etched into it, and you simply took silver tape and covered it up.
Yeah, I thought I can't. I mean, the end has got this stuff on it, which everyone knows now. But I thought I can't actually have a, you know, this to me looked like a mystical weapon of the Jedi's. It had that kind of gravitas to it, and I thought I better not have the name on it. It humanizes it. So I found silver tape that matched, and just stuck that round there. And there was always a filter on the film, and in movie, those times on movie film, when it's projected, you don't see a lot of details.
Right.
So in fact, when they were digitizing the films, I was at the ranch, and George showed me he was digitizing the first one. It becomes so sharp, you could see, gaffer tape is a black tape we use all the time, you could see where it was sticking Darth Vader together, and C-3PO had gold tape sticking him together, because the first time he ever wore that suit was the first day of shooting in Tunisia. He never had time to get it
Really?
on
There was no
before,
tests
ever.
to try on?
He learned that day that once you get in, you can't get out of it.
For decades.
And he realized then, I gotta go to the bathroom. So, yeah, and the first step he made, the leg shattered. It all
Oh, really?
broke into
Fell
bits.
apart?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
all stuck together.
Wow.
You can
I
see
can't even
when he-
imagine how hot it was. For him and Kenny in that little tin can, it must have been so hot.
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah,
easy.
does anyone know about the Pink Shorts guy? The famous Pink Shorts guy? Yeah, there's a
the
sound guy.
cosplayer,
Yeah. No. Well, on set, if you look at the original Star Wars, like behind the scenes, there's some shots of a guy who's the boom guy, and he has nothing on but the tiniest little short pair of pink shorts. So it's just a dude with a boom and pink shorts. And he shows up out of these pictures, so it's just become like a fan known thing. Like you say, people cosplay this guy.
They do.
Like
Go
get
around
together
with
and
the
like
pink- go around in pink
celebration
shorts. It's
and
true.
stuff. I've asked Roger, he doesn't remember. He doesn't remember the guy. He doesn't remember him sticking out. But it just, whenever I see that guy, and I think about that guy was so hot, he got down to pretty
Yeah.
much being naked. And how hot Kenny must have been in that
Yeah, he
outfit.
was. It
It
was
must
hot.
have been unbearable. Like,
Well, he only was in it. Another story. So, the special effects guy was. He was a clever man. He had a whole unit, and was very full of himself. He'd always say, "Oh, it's going to be fantastic." And right before shooting, John Barry, the designer, called me and Les, who's the other art director, who went out to Tunisia with me, and he said, "I don't believe this is going to work. The radio control's not going to work. We're going to have to make him move along. Build a lightweight fiberglass one, get the shop to do it. You can pull on fishing wire. Don't tell anyone." Only Gary Kurtz knew. The first shot we ever did was Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen choosing the drawers. And the first shot, of course, was Kenny Baker trying to kind of would have been moving it, but he had to come out, and so it had to be radio controlled.
yeah.
And I think he crashed, hit another robot, crashed over like that. And I think the special effects John Steers had always used an excuse in London, because he went straight in front of the crew. Now we're in Tunisia, 3 miles up a desert track. There's nothing. The nearest town, camels and donkey carts.
Yeah.
So he went in front of the crew and he said, "It's the blooming taxis. They're upsetting my radio control."
Excuses, right?
And
Awesome.
Gary Kurtz looked and he said, "Can you get the monofilament one?" Which Les didn't know. He's British. He said, "What's monofilament?" Yeah, I said, "Les is the fishing wire." So from then on, we put a board like this down on the surface, put a bit of sand on the edge, and we pulled R2D2 along on fishing wire, and he only worked once in radio control when he's in the valley right before he gets zapped. And
Yeah.
that one going down here, he walked.
Yeah.
But the others, we pulled them on a fishing wire for everything.
You gotta make it happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, I like that. I like that kind of pioneering
Yeah.
kind of spirit.
Well,
You just,
that's
you don't
guerrilla
ever give up.
filmmaking
Yeah, you
at
get
its
it done.
purest, right? Like that's what I love about Star Wars most of all is it's a truly independent guerrilla-made film.
Yeah.
Like, you guys threw that thing together with whatever you could.
well, the other one, there's a famous comlink, which is the Communicator.
From Phantom Menace.
No,
Wait, the old one you're
Star Wars.
talking about. Yeah, yeah.
They have to use it when they're in the garbage contractor, and they're calling up to C-3PO. I wasn't going to do that because I was doing things as I went. I mean, the cantina took all my time. I mean, the garbage, everything,
Right.
like doing all the sets, getting ready. The Millennium Falcon hold was a nightmare for me to get that thing to work and look right with all this junk. So I left it. George was shooting, and I was with John Barry, the designer. He was putting together some drawings for a part of the set, and he said, "Can you bring me some bits of plumbing or something to look at?" I'm in the office showing him this piece of plumbing that goes under a sink, and the phone rings, and John said, "Oh, George needs the comlink now on the floor. Can you do something and make one?" And literally, this is Providence. As I said it, I was unscrewing the bend on the plumbing. The filter dropped into my hand, and I went, "Oh, there it is." I ran to the office, stuck one ring round it, went straight down to George, and he went, "Oh, perfect." Put it in the hand, and that became
Awesome.
the Communicator. The whole thing was made like this. So
Brilliant.
I do
You
tell
could
all
make a
these
movie
stories.
that would be super entertaining about the making of Star Wars, and it would be fantastic. Just like that SNL movie we just did. It'd be super cool. Okay, so for the sake of time, there's a few things we want to get through. So I'm gonna fill in some gaps. Roger has a book, Cinema Alchemist. It's all about the making of Star Wars and Alien. There's a new printing now available, which has a brand new foreword from George Lucas. And George has the kindest, most beautiful words to say about Roger. It's amazing. So in that book, from this point, you will hear about how Roger, after working on Star Wars, got a chance to make his own short film, Black Angel, which George helped him get made. And that movie was then shown before Empire Strikes Back. So Roger didn't work on Empire Strikes Back because he was making that film. He was going to be making another film that wasn't happening after that at the time yet. So through being part of the family, he ended up as a second unit director on Return of the Jedi. You shot a lot of Ewok scenes and stuff,
That was
right?
10 days doing Ewok.
10 days
George
doing
loved them.
Ewoks.
I wanted to do
Yeah.
more special effects stuff, and he kept loving what I was doing. I was bossing Warwick Davis around.
That's
He was 11 years
so
old. doing
11-year-old,
sets.
right.
I had Jim Henson's puppets, little babies in nests dancing.
Yeah.
Everything I shot, George was loving more and more.
Yeah.
I was saying, "Please, can I stop doing Ewoks?"
So that turns out fantastic, of course. And then many years later, these stories are all in the book. That's why I'm telling you. These are the kind of stories you can read. Many years later, time comes around. Roger's not working on anything at the moment, and he's like, "Hey, you're making Phantom Menace. You need some help. You put my name on the list." They put his name on the list, and very quickly we're like, "Oh yeah, we do need your help." So again, to Tunisia, Roger went to help second unit directing on Phantom Menace. That is all in this amazing book. He just left, and I was going through that so we could talk about some Alien. Because when you come back, sorry, what was his name?
Harley?
Harley?
Yeah.
Tell Harley to get back in here so he can hear his Alien story, if he's still out there. So he had the same type of experience, I believe, working on Life of Brian, right? Was just having no money, get her done somehow. You got tight with Terry Gilliam.
We designed
You're
it
good.
over the years, we had to make the whole thing together.
So having done Star Wars, that led to Roger being known as being able to get this stuff together, and he had a certain aesthetic, vision. Was it Ridley himself who approached you and said, "I need your help on Alien"?
I knew Ridley. I directed commercials for him and his brother, so we were friends. When he started Alien, he took the designer who did his commercials, who actually wasn't a science fiction fan at all, but so he worked out with Ridley how they could make the Nostromo as one set. There was no like open sets like normal films. He went in that because he wanted to travel around the corridors doing those opening shots and everything. So they snaked it around and they got a wooden frame done. I was doing Life of Brian, and 6 weeks before we packed up, everything was ready to go to Tunisia. Lord Delphon, who was financing it, read the script and cancelled it immediately and said, "This is blasphemous, I'm not doing this." And I drove up to the London office of the producers, who were explaining to me, "We're going to make this film, we want you back," and everything. And the phone rang and they said, "It's Ridley." And he said, "Is that true?" And he said, "Get your backside down to Shepperton right now, I need you." Because I'd done the Millennium Falcon basically, and what he wanted was a space truck, an army truck in space. So I drove down there, and I knew Ridley. I mean, his head is a camera. He's the incredible, the images that I knew he was going to do, and I'd seen some of the storyboards, and I knew this was going to be special. And I read the script quickly. And also in the office there were 6 original Giger paintings around the wall. Now I thought this is going to be something special. Again, no money. Fox had no, despite the success of Star Wars, this was the first R-rated science fiction movie ever. They didn't think it was going to work or make money. So as I joined, they cut $600,000 out of a small budget. And there isn't any stars, it comes out of the art fund. A lot of sets were designated out as I joined. I'm walking across to go and meet Michael Seymour, the designer, the set decorator who was doing the job I did on Star Wars. I was now art director. Ran to me and hugged me and said, "I don't know what to do with all this scrap, what do I do? I don't understand." I said, "But thank God you're here." And Michael had taken on a kid, literally, he was 18, who said, "I can do what Roger did, I know how to do all of that." And he had a few piles of bits of junk. So I ordered a lorry loads, truckloads of junk. And then Ridley, and there was a screening, and the second day I was there, of Dr. Strangelove. And Michael Seymour, the designer, came out, and Ridley said, "I want sets like hair." "What does he mean? Are we doing hair in the sets? I don't understand." He was very English. And I said, "No, he means switches everywhere, tubes, like I did it." "Oh, well, you go do that." So we built, Ridley wanted Sigourney Weaver, and the studio wanted a star, of course. So they allowed him to do a screen test, and he said to me, "Can you build me a piece of corridor? I want to put her in action with a gun, and we'll make it look like Alien's going to look." So I built him that piece. That's on YouTube, you can see it. And the only difference is it had windows, cockpit windows around it, which ruined the kind of nightmare claustrophobia look it had to have. Those, we took those out. And that's where it started. And again, I was just buying truckloads of airplanes. I got 2 special effects boys to build me switch panels. That's all they did, because I had hundreds of them. And the set property I'm most proud, I love the Millennium Falcon. I just think it's awesome. But the set I'm most proud of I ever did was the bridge in Alien. And it was a nightmare. And Ridley wanted to shoot anamorphic, which is the big wide screen, and he wanted it claustrophobic. So he drove the designer mad, because he kept asking for the ceiling to be lower and lower. This is a major endeavour. They already built it. He did it 6 times until it actually was in the camera. And I was buying junk and scrap and trying to get this thing to look right. I think there's a book on the making of Alien. There's a headline sent from me saying this was a monster of coordination, because I thought, right, this time I can have a switch flicks and a light will come on. I wanted interaction for the actors, so it was all being wired up at the same time. I found, again, the same seats like I used on Star Wars, and the special effects was a genius, Nick Alder, on this one. He wired up the seats so they could slide backwards and forwards when they went into there. It was very claustrophobic, controls and everything. And this was made the same way. They all said, when the ship wakes up, if you watch it, there's the pecking birds, which we put in, and there's papers fluttering, and the first thing you see is like the computer coming alive, reflected in the helmet, one of the helmets that were laid out in the bridge. There was no way to do it. So again, I said to Ridley, listen, I used to do stuff with 8mm cameras. We used to do projecting stuff on walls. I think I could make it work. And so they got me some very primitive computer readout stuff, put on 16mm. We got a 16mm projector. Ridley got the camera set up, and I just said, you shoot, I'm going to move it around and alter the focus until the lettering is right, and that's what's in the film. And even the paper's fluttering. He said, I want to show the ship is alive, there's no one there. How do we do papers fluttering? So I grabbed the hairdryer from the hairdresser. I got under the set, which I got scratched, it's all wood. And I just said, I'm going to blow the papers, you shoot when it's right. And so that's how we did that. That kind of went right through Alien as well. So these films, everyone sees now as huge special effects. And in fact, that's why that's why I was forced to write this book, because they've both stood the time, they've both become cinema classics, really. I mean, Star Wars more than anything. But they came out of a time of a group of kind of low-budget revolutionaries trying to get stuff done.
Well, you were one of George Lucas's Furious Five. I mean, there's 4 or 5 of you basically who are responsible for Star Wars. You're the ones that stuck with him, the ones that had his back.
No, he's done it.
He's got a lot to do. He's got a show to run out.
Yeah.
So, that's amazing. Do we have any questions specifically? Yes.
What are your thoughts on the Alien Romulus and all the new Star Wars that's out? Like, there's so many, The Mandalorian and all that.
I actually like Alien Romulus. He went back and did a lot of it with live action animatronics, which I think, and the story works. That one, I took my son to see it, and I thought, wow, this works. This is good. I went to see Force Awakens, and JJ's a really good filmmaker, there's no question. He actually restored back Star Trek when he made that first one, and I thought he brought it back to a modern audience. He did a really good job. The problem was that nobody in Disney's, George had written the outlines for those 3, because he always told me I have 9, I want to do 9. And Kathleen Kennedy put them in a drawer and let each director do what he wanted. George never did that. Everything on Star Wars is planned right from the beginning. When we made the first Star Wars, that is episode 4. He'd already written everything out. The characters, he had everything worked out for this. And he was mentored by Joseph Campbell, who's the great mythologist, who taught him how you bury keys within the story that will connect you to the subconscious. And so what we got were 2 filmmakers. The first one made a film really to try to bring the fans back, because they didn't know it was ever going to work again and everything. So I think he did a good job. I personally hated the next one. As soon as I saw him throw the lightsaber away and burn all the goods, and he turned. The story of Star Wars is this journey of Luke Skywalker. It's the classic hero's journey. He turned the hero into a whinging failure who was like moaning and just. And I personally think he just thought, as a young filmmaker, you know what? I'm going to do the opposite of what everyone thinks, just to make it all. So I personally couldn't stand that one. I think JJ had to repair what the damage was done and tried to do it on the last one and made a good film out of it. But I'm with James Cameron, who, Avatar, I mean, everything that James has done. He said, look, JJ's a friend of mine after he saw Force Awakens. And he said he's a genius filmmaker, but I have to be honest, in every Star Wars movie there's more invention, more kind of new ideas in each of the one. George wrote things that couldn't be done, and he hired enough people who only had a bit of experience, but would never say to him, no, Gov, this is how we've always done it, this is how it works. He hired right across the board, even ILM. Joe Johnson, who did the Millennium Falcon, was a beach bum. He just went for a job. He needed some money, and they found out he could draw and he could actually build models. So I think, and I always say God bless Dave Filoni, because when he did The Mandalorian, Dave was really stringent on bringing back everything that was in the first, and he was trained by George. He's another example. He was an animator at Disney. He got somehow chosen to go when they were interviewing people for Clone Wars, and they were big supervisors to go and run the whole thing. He got chosen. He says, I knew I would never get this job, but I was going to sit at a table with George Lucas. I can dine out for the rest of my life on this. George chose him. He saw something in this young kid who understood what he was trying to do. So he brought it all back. I think that anything that he's been involved with. So, we've still got Star Wars, and it's not going to go away. And I personally think George might come back now, because the museum is opening next year, and he designs everything, the hinges, he designs everything. Everything goes into it. George is not somebody who's now going to think, oh, okay, I'll get some slippers and sit by the fire. I think he's seen what has happened to this. He is the creator of it, after all, and it comes from him. And I do all of this because I just think he gives the right message to the world. He's given the world something to believe in individually. I meet so many families with parents and children. There's a communication that is really hard. I have a son, most of the time he's stuck on a bloody Switch, Nintendo. And every parent I meet says the same story. But Star Wars has kind of given a communication for everybody, and this was all planned by George. He wanted to make a myth, he wanted to create, and every film he made is for 9 to 12-year-olds. And it's interesting how many adults, I ask them all the time, oh yeah, Empire Strikes Back. That's George's least favourite. And George had so much on his plate trying to get ILM working and everything, and he thought, I'll leave it to a big Hollywood director to make it, with Gary Kurtz. And he made an adult film. That's why adults love it. All the others are made for 9 to 12-year-olds, and George, my fault that adult, which is true. So I just think he cares so much about this deep down, and you've probably seen him when he got a Lifetime Achievement Award at Cannes. It's the first time he's ever opened up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, they didn't go with my stuff.
No.
Guess that was a mistake.
So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens, and I think now Alien, that's a success, whereas the others weren't. So the studios are going to now realise, maybe they make this mistake, and I don't know if any of you like the Witcher series. It's one of my favourite series. What do they do now? They fire the lead actor, who is the Witcher. He has read the books. He's read he's more than a fan. He brought the dialogue back, everything. They fire him. They brought on 2 showrunners who said, no, we can do it better now ourselves. The fans are going to desert this in droves. And it's a similar mistake that Hollywood make. They think money can cure anything. And I think that, but Star Wars in a way is bigger than them because the fans are driving it and the fans know what they want. And it's a universal belief. It's a myth for the modern world, like the great myths of the past. We all need myths. We all need these things to help us, And the Luke Skywalker story is not the Luke Skywalker story. It's a metaphor for all of us. Everybody is your own hero. You find your way in life and get through it. So that's why I do all of this, because I think it's very important for the world to have. There isn't much else now.
Star Wars has gotten so big, it's got genres within it. Like there's kiddie Star Wars, there's toddler Star Wars, there's adult and/or Star Wars. Like there's literally different types of Star Wars itself. So it's just so epic. And this giant, incredible universe that half the world loves so much was very much so created by this guy. So ladies and gentlemen, please go see Roger over his table. Oh, sorry, yeah. I just don't want to repeat on that.
I said you still have a blow dryer. No.
Roger's right outside. He's got his book. He's going to be around. Lots of shows, lots of things. If you're interested in a 3-hour epic version of this, on my YouTube channel, An Elegant Weapon, there's 2 parts. They're an hour and a half each, long-form videos of a conversation between me and Roger about his entire career from beginning to end. So if you're interested in that, that's there to watch. Otherwise, you can go meet Roger outside. Thank you so much for coming out, and may the force be with you.
Thank you.
Roger Christian.